On Thanksgiving Day, I passed the mashed potatoes and got handed a letter disowning me, signed by both my parents. No shouting, no drama, just cold signatures on crisp paper, slipped between a dinner napkin and a slice of turkey. 3 months later, I stood in the fluorescent hallway of a hospital, my mother's voice trembling as she begged. On Thanksgiving Day, I passed the mashed potatoes and got handed a letter disowning me to sign the insurance forms that could save their home. "Please, sweetheart," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "We didn't know things would turn out like this." But I had known. For years. Subscribe to my channel to stay updated with future content. Enjoy the rest of the video and feel free to share where you're watching from. Thanksgiving had always been my mother's holiday. She treated it like the Super Bowl of family appearances. The house had to be spotless, the food had to be perfect, and most importantly, our dysfunction had to be hidden under polite conversation and forced smiles. I was 26 that year, living in a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of Portland, Oregon, working 2 jobs to stay afloat, one as a part-time graphic designer and the other bartending on weekends. My car was a rickety old Corolla that rattled every time it hit 30 miles per hour, and I hadn't had a vacation in 3 years. But my parents? They lived in a 5-bedroom house in the suburbs. White siding, double garage, 2 golden retrievers. You'd think they were the all-American dream. Except dreams don't usually include emotionally distant fathers and mothers who twist words like knives. I hadn't planned to go to Thanksgiving that year. Every time I visited, I left feeling like a failure, like a guest in a house I used to call home. My parents had always been more invested in my younger brother, Owen. He was the golden child. The football player turned startup founder with a shiny new fiancé and an Instagram full of grind-set quotes. My parents poured money and pride into him like he was a retirement plan. Me? I was the creative one, the artsy one, the difficult child, the one who came out as bisexual in a family that believed in traditional values. That announcement alone nearly got me kicked out at 19. The only reason they didn't was because my grandmother, God rest her, intervened. She paid for my community college tuition and gave me enough to get my first apartment when my dad said, "If you're gonna live your life like that, don't expect help from this family." But this year, Owen insisted I come, said he wanted the whole family together for once, said his fiancée, Tara, had never met me and wanted to, and after a week of him blowing up my phone and my mom sending passive-aggressive text messages about how nice it would be if I showed my face, I agreed. One dinner. I could survive one dinner. When I arrived, nothing had changed. The house smelled like cinnamon candles and judgment. My father gave me the usual nod instead of a hug. My mother gave me a once-over glance that settled on my boots, then looked away like she'd just smelled garbage. "Still working at that bar?" she asked as she took my coat. "Still pretending to care?" I answered, smiling. She didn't laugh. Dinner was tense from the start. Owen sat at the head of the table like a king, beaming as he talked about his latest pitch to investors. My father nodded with pride. My mother kept praising Tara for bringing a homemade cranberry tart, as if she'd invented the concept of dessert. They asked me 2 questions during the entire meal. "How's work?" and "Still living alone?" When I said I'd just landed a contract to design logos for a small tech firm, my dad muttered, "Hope it pays more than tips." I laughed it off. I always did. Because I had learned that reacting only gave them more ammo. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. As dessert was being served, my mother placed a folded envelope beside my plate. "What's this?" I asked. "Just something we wanted to give you. It's time," she said cryptically, slicing into her tart. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, neatly typed, with both their signatures at the bottom. It read like a contract, a formal statement declaring that they no longer considered me their child, that I was emotionally and ideologically incompatible with their family, that I had consistently rejected their guidance and moral values, and that moving forward, I would be excluded from family decisions and financial considerations. The paper shook in my hands. "This is a joke, right?" I asked. Owen went silent. Tara looked stunned. My father picked up his wine glass. "It's not personal," he said calmly. "It's necessary. You've made it clear who you are, and we're choosing peace." I felt like someone had shoved ice down my spine. "You're disowning me," I said flatly, "at Thanksgiving." "You disowned us years ago," my mother said, "when you walked away from everything we taught you." Everything in me wanted to scream, to flip the table, to throw the cranberry tart against the wall and storm out. But I didn't. I stood up slowly, folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope. "Thank you," I said, voice trembling. "This makes everything so much easier." And I left. Outside, the cold hit me like a wall. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could drive. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over halfway home. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at my dashboard, heart pounding, realizing I'd spent my whole life trying to be accepted by people who saw me as a problem to be fixed. When I got home, I burned the letter in my kitchen sink. After that night, I cut all ties. I didn't answer texts. I didn't return calls. I blocked my mother's number and muted Owen on social media. They'd made their choice, and I made mine. I wasn't going to chase love I had to beg for. For the first time in my life, I felt free, not healed, not whole. But unhooked from the invisible leash I'd been dragging since childhood, I threw myself into work. The tech firm gig went well, and I landed another client through them, a boutique clothing brand that needed a full rebranding. For once, I was building momentum. Money was still tight, but I wasn't relying on tips to keep my fridge full. I started taking weekends off from the bar, something I hadn't done in over a year. Zara, my best friend and upstairs neighbor, noticed the change. "You've got this weird glow," she said one morning as we stood in line for coffee. "Trauma release looks good on me," I joked. I told her everything that happened on Thanksgiving. She wasn't shocked. "They never deserved you," she said. "They just wanted a version of you they could control." It felt true. All of it. December came and went. For the first time, I spent the holidays with chosen family. Zara, a couple of friends from the design world, and even a guy I'd been casually seeing. We made homemade pizza instead of turkey, and no one handed me a disownment letter with dessert. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest and safe. Then January hit, and the silence broke. It started with an email. Subject line, "Urgent, from Mom." I almost deleted it on sight, but the word urgent caught me. "Olivia, please, it's your father. He had a heart attack. It's serious. He's in the ICU at St. Anne's. We need to talk. Mom." I stared at the screen, numb. For a moment, I felt nothing. Then, like a dam cracking, memories flooded in. My dad teaching me how to ride a bike. His face at my high school graduation, unreadable as always. Him standing in the kitchen doorway the night I told them I was bi, arms crossed, jaw tight. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to shut the laptop and pretend I never saw it. Another part whispered, "What if he dies, and you never speak again?" I didn't reply, but I Googled the hospital. St. Anne's was 20 minutes from my place. The next morning I showed up. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just walked into that cold, too bright lobby and gave the nurse my father's name. She led me through a maze of sterile white hallways until we reached a room with a glass window. My father was inside. Tubes in his nose, IV in his arm. His skin looked gray, shrunk, small. My mother sat in the corner, eyes bloodshot, still wearing her full makeup like she hadn't slept. When she saw me, she stood. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. I didn't move. My hands were in my coat pockets, fists clenched. "I got your email," I said. Her lip quivered. "They don't know if he'll make it through the week. They're running tests. He needs surgery and—" She paused, looking down. "We're not covered." That caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "We switched insurance providers this year. There's a clause. He's not eligible for full coverage until March. We didn't know. We didn't read the fine print." And that's my problem how? I asked. Her face fell. She looked at me, desperate. I wouldn't ask if it weren't life or death. Where's Owen? She flinched. He's traveling in Bali. He didn't respond when I called. I almost laughed. Of course he was in Bali. Of course he wasn't answering. That's how it always worked. I took the hit while Owen disappeared behind good hair and hollow apologies. The nurse interrupted us then, asking if I wanted to step inside. I said no. Instead, I stood there, watching my father breathe through a machine, wondering if he'd even want me there, if he'd even open his eyes and acknowledge me if I walked in. I turned back to my mother. I'll think about it, I said. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced my apartment until 2 a.m., running numbers in my head. If I signed, I'd be liable for any unpaid costs if he didn't recover, or worse, if they refused to pay. My credit could tank. My life could be wrecked. I was finally getting stable, finally building something for myself. But he was still my dad, even if he never treated me like his daughter. The next day, I emailed the hospital's billing department anonymously and asked for a cost estimate. The reply, $147,000, minimum, not including aftercare. I sat back in my chair, stunned. The amount was so large it almost didn't feel real. Later that evening, Owen finally texted me. Hey, Mom said you're back in town. Just sign the forms. We'll figure it out later. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a command. That was the moment I made my decision. I went back to the hospital the next morning. My mother stood when I entered the waiting room. Well? She asked, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. I spoke to the billing office, I said. The estimate's almost $150. She nodded, eyes welling up. I know. We don't have it. Your father's credit is maxed. We're trying to refinance the house. Why not sell the second property? I asked. She stiffened. That's Owen's future home. And there it was. Even when his father was dying, even when they were on the edge of financial ruin, Owen's comfort came first. I smiled. It was small, sad. I'm not signing. She looked like I'd slapped her. You can't mean that. I do, I said, calm and steady. You made it clear I'm not part of this family. You put it in writing. That was a mistake. No, I said, it was honest. The first honest thing you two have ever done. And I'm done pretending it didn't happen. Her lip trembled. You'll let him die? I'm not letting anyone die, I said. I'm just not sacrificing myself for people who'd never do the same. I turned and walked away. She didn't call after me. Not that day. But the messages started that night. First from her, then from cousins, then extended family. How could you do this? It's your father. Blood is thicker than pride. You're making this about yourself. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I forwarded every message to a new folder in my inbox labeled, Proof I Owe Them Nothing. For a while, I thought I'd made peace with my decision, but I underestimated how quickly guilt can be weaponized, especially by family. The texts didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me with lines like, He's your father, Olivia. You only get one. You're going to regret this when he's gone. One even wrote, We're all ashamed of you. I nearly laughed at that one. Ashamed? These were the same people who watched my parents treat me like I was disposable for years and never said a word. Not when they skipped my art shows. Not when they let Owen trash my identity behind my back. Not when they sat around the table and let me shrink into silence. But now, they found their voices? It was rich, hypocrisy dressed up as concern. Still, something in me wavered. Guilt isn't logical. It just settles in, like mold, quiet, damp, dangerous. So I did the thing I knew I shouldn't. I drove by the hospital again, just once. I didn't go in. I parked across the street, watched the building's windows glow against the night sky, and wondered what was happening behind them. Was he conscious? Was he asking for me? Would he even care if I came? Then I drove home. It was supposed to be closure. Instead, it became a turning point. The next day, things got worse. Zara called me at noon, her voice sharp and urgent. "You need to get on Facebook. Now." I hadn't used Facebook in months. Most of my real friends were on Discord or Instagram, but I logged in. At the top of my feed was a post, shared by my aunt, of course. It was a photo of my father in a hospital bed, pale, tubes, machines. My mother was holding his hand. The caption read, "Please pray for Richard. After his heart attack, our family is fighting not just for his health, but against the cold decisions of those who've turned their backs on us in our time of need. Family isn't always blood, but it should be." Below it were dozens of comments. "Stay strong." "Some people are just heartless." "Disowning your parents during a crisis? Shameful." "Praying for a miracle, and for certain daughters to find compassion." My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew. I felt like I was being publicly flogged in the town square, with relatives and distant acquaintances taking turns tossing rotten fruit. I closed the laptop and just sat there, hands trembling. This wasn't about one decision anymore. It was about erasing the truth. They were rewriting history, casting me as a villain in a play they'd directed for years. So I did something I hadn't planned. I wrote a response. It wasn't angry, it wasn't defensive, it was honest. I posted a note to my page, set to public, and titled it, "Before you judge me, read this." For anyone who's seen the recent posts and wants the full story, here it is. At Thanksgiving, my parents handed me a letter disowning me. Formally. Not out of anger, but by design. Because I didn't live the life they wanted. Because I came out. Because I chose freedom over compliance. I was told I was no longer part of the family. That I had been emotionally and morally incompatible with their values. There are receipts. There are witnesses. Now, after decades of silence, condescension, and exclusion, I've been asked to legally and financially take responsibility for the same people who pushed me away. My answer was no. Not out of vengeance, but out of self-preservation. I will not bankrupt myself for people who treated me like a burden. I will not be guilted into becoming the safety net they denied me. If that makes me cruel in your eyes, so be it. But cruelty is handing someone a rejection letter on a holiday and then expecting them to forget it 3 months later. I wish my father recovery and peace. But I'm done being the scapegoat in someone else's redemption arc. Olivia. I didn't expect it to go viral, but it did. Within 24 hours, it had over 10,000 shares. I got DMs from strangers, some angry, of course, but many others supportive. Messages from people who had gone through similar things, who had been disowned, rejected, erased, only to be remembered when someone needed money or a caretaker or an emotional punching bag. "Thank you for writing this. I thought I was the only one." "You're brave for saying no." "I wish I had." "Don't let guilt pull you back into a house that set you on fire." And beneath the validation, something else started to happen. The family's mask began to slip. 2 days after my post went viral, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was from my cousin Haley. "Hey, I saw your post. Just wanted to say, I believe you. I've seen the way they treated you, and you're not the only one." She went on to share that her younger sister, Ava, had also been subtly pushed out of family functions after coming out as trans, that my mother had once called her an attention seeker and said the family didn't need drama like that. It hit me like a gut punch. I hadn't known. Ava and I weren't close, but I remembered her as a quiet, bright girl who used to draw on napkins at family dinners. Just like I had. That same day, another message came in, from an uncle I barely remembered. "They asked me to co-sign the medical forms last week. I said no." "Your brother?" He didn't even answer. "But they didn't post about that, did they?" Number they hadn't. The truth had cracked through their curated image. They wanted someone to blame, someone to hold the weight, someone who wouldn't fight back. But I had finally learned how to say no, and this time it echoed. The hospital sent another message the next day, a quiet, polite follow-up to confirm that no eligible co-signer had come forward. I didn't respond, because I wasn't the emergency contact anymore. And for once, that wasn't a tragedy. It was freedom. Still, I knew something was coming. They weren't going to let this go quietly. And they didn't. A week later, I received a legal notice in the mail. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and marked with bold red text that read, "Confidential legal notice, open immediately." I almost laughed. It sat between my utility bill and a coupon flyer for frozen dinners. Just another piece of mail in a week already overflowing with chaos. I opened it slowly. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. Inside were 4 printed pages. Legal language, headers, signatures, and in the center of it all, my name. Bold, underlined, accused, they were threatening legal action. Specifically, my parents had filed a civil petition attempting to make me financially liable for my father's medical costs, citing something called filial responsibility. Apparently, in a few states, including Oregon, there were obscure laws still on the books that allowed adult children to be held responsible for the debts of indigent parents, rarely enforced, almost never used. But it was real, and now it had my name on it. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. There it was, in black and white. Failure to provide appropriate support to dependent parents may result in financial penalty, court-enforced restitution, or legal garnishment pending judicial review. Below it, my parents' handwritten statement, "Our daughter, Olivia Morgan, has the means and ability to assist with these costs, but has chosen to withhold support despite our medical and financial emergencies." The means and ability? I worked 2 jobs, barely had $600 in savings, and was finally making just enough to not panic at every rent cycle. But they didn't care about facts, they cared about control. Zara found me sitting on the floor of my apartment, the notice in my lap and my cat chewing on the corner of the envelope. She didn't even ask what happened, just picked up the papers and read in silence. Then, "They're insane." "It won't go anywhere," I said quietly. "They won't win. They can't." "But they can still drag you through hell trying," she replied. She wasn't wrong. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have time to fight. But I also couldn't afford to ignore this, not just for the financial risk, but for what it meant. They were willing to sue me to force my hand, to make me pay, literally. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the words failure to provide over and over again in my head, like I'd failed them by not letting myself be used. So I did what I do when I need clarity. I wrote, not a viral post, not a rant, just a private letter to myself. "Dear Olivia, you didn't cause this. You didn't ask to be born into a house that made love conditional. You didn't choose to be the child they couldn't mold. You chose to survive. And survive again, and again. And now they want to punish you for that. Let them try. But don't forget who you are, not their scapegoat, not their savior. You're free now, and free people don't kneel." The next morning, I called every legal aid clinic I could find. Most were booked weeks out, but one, Blessing and Finch Legal Resources, offered a free consultation. A paralegal named Denise called me back within a day. Her voice was calm, kind, unfazed. "This happens more than you'd think," she said. "Filial support laws are a last resort tactic. They scare people into submission." "Can they win?" I asked. "Highly unlikely. You're financially independent, not wealthy. No history of support, no contract. You've already been disowned, yes?" I chuckled bitterly. "In writing." "Then they'd have to argue that you owe a duty they themselves legally severed. You can't have it both ways in court." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. She offered to help me draft a formal response, not just to the court, but to my parents' attorney. It was short, director, powerful. "Ms. Morgan does not accept legal or financial responsibility for the medical debts of individuals who have formally disowned her. Any further attempts to force compliance through legal action will be met with countersuit and full public disclosure of written documentation." They were bluffing, and I had just called it. The fallout was instant. Within 72 hours, their attorney withdrew the petition pending reassessment, which was a fancy way of saying we didn't think she'd fight back. But it wasn't over. That same week, I received a voicemail from my father. His voice was weak, slow, but unmistakable. "Olivia, your mother didn't tell me she was doing this. I didn't approve it. I wanted to hear your voice. I know I've made mistakes. I know I wasn't fair to you, but suing you wasn't my idea. Please believe that." I didn't know what to think. It was the first direct communication from him in nearly 2 years. He didn't argue. That silence was loud enough. We sat there for a long time, the heart monitor ticking steadily beside him. Somewhere down the hallway, a machine beeped and a door creaked shut. Finally, I said, "Why now?" He looked at me. "You've had years to apologize. You've watched this happen again and again. To me, to Avenue, to anyone who didn't fit the mold. So why now?" He hesitated. "Because now, I don't have much time left, and for the first time, I'm starting to understand what that means." I folded my arms. "You don't get to make this about your mortality. Not after everything." "I know," he whispered. "I don't need you to fear dying," I said, leaning forward. "I need you to regret how you lived." That hit him. I could see it. Not defensiveness, not anger, just a deep, painful understanding. "I do," he said. "I regret it. I regret thinking silence was safer than acceptance. That control was better than connection. I regret every moment I let you feel like you weren't enough." My throat tightened. "And I'm sorry," he said, "for the letter, for the lawsuit, for making you think you ever had to earn our love." I let the words hang in the air, unsure what to do with them, because part of me wanted this, needed it, and part of me didn't trust it at all. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally. "You don't have to," he replied. "You don't owe me that." I nodded. We sat together for another 15 minutes, in silence, but this time it wasn't the kind that hurt. It was just honest. Before I left, he said something I didn't expect. "I read your post." That made me freeze. "Really?" He nodded. "It hurt, but it was fair." I looked at him one last time. "I didn't write it to hurt you. I wrote it to heal me." "I know." And I left. 2 weeks later, he passed away. Heart failure. I didn't attend the funeral. That choice sparked another wave of messages. From Owen, from my mother, from others who still believed a daughter's worth is measured in appearances, not boundaries. But I didn't respond. I had said my goodbye already. In room 214, on my own terms, without expectation, without pretending. A few months later, I received a letter in the mail. This time, it wasn't a lawsuit. It was a copy of my father's amended will. He had left me nothing, except for a single handwritten note. "You don't need anything from me anymore. You never did. I'm sorry it took me too long to see that. Love, Dad." I folded it gently, placed it in the same envelope that once held the photo, and I put it away. It's been almost a year since Thanksgiving. My life is quieter now, clearer. I freelance full-time. I've paid off half my student loans. I moved to a place with more sunlight, fewer memories, and most importantly, I'm free. Not because my father is gone, but because I finally let go of the version of myself that kept waiting for someone else to love her the right way. I choose me now. And I don't sign papers to prove my worth anymore. Let that be the real ending, or maybe the beginning.